There are 35 families benefiting from this service in the Birmingham area, but at least another 300 families in the city miss out because there's not enough money to fund the scheme, and there are thousands more all round the country. It is important that the social services do not see self-help groups as letting the welfare state off the hook. Social services everywhere should commit themselves to giving out money to make schemes like this possible. We have free information sheets about tape slides and the Birmingham Parents Relief Service, and of course the Black Ink Collective. If you'd like one, please send us a large stamped addressed envelope to Grapevine, BBC TV, London W12 8QT. Or you can call in at your BBC local radio station for a fact sheet outlining all the issues on tonight's programme.
Next Wednesday, Grapevine takes a look at women's health, a film made by some fishermen from Ambleside, a Good Neighbours scheme in Southall in London, and some theatre in the studio from 3 women. This is BBC Two. There now follows a party political broadcast by the Conservative Party.
I dare say that to most people things don't look much brighter today than they did a year ago. In fact, there's quite a difference. The difference is that now we're just beginning to see the first signs of success. I'd like to say it's all the government's success, but that wouldn't be true. Certainly not the whole truth anyway. Probably the most important thing we have done has been to give people more of a chance to get on for themselves with some of the changes we've all known were necessary for years. So how does it look? Well, unemployment's still desperately high, I know. And I'm afraid it's going to stay like that for quite a time. But good things are beginning to happen. Let's look at a couple of signals of success. Industrial production. We all know that's been falling for some time. But now that's turned. It's started the slow but steady rise everyone's been waiting for. It started in the spring. It's been going up since then. There are other encouraging signs. Orders in the engineering industries, for example. In the last 3 months, home orders are up 4.5%. Export orders are up 14%. That's not the government at work, that's Britain at work. And there's something more important than the figures. In the last year or so, we've seen a growing spirit of determination and realism. We still read about strikes and disputes, of course, though less often than we did. What doesn't make the news, it's less dramatic but far more significant, is the thousands of sensible pay settlements that are being made all over Britain, and the thousands of firms that are producing as much as before with fewer people. Strange as it may seem, that's the only way to more jobs in the long run, starting to make British goods competitive again with the very best that foreigners can produce. The measures I've just announced are simply the ones we need to keep us on that course. It would be madness to throw that progress away in a huge burst of government spending to create a few temporary extra jobs. We'd soon see prices shooting through the roof again. When you hear people talk about reflation rather than careful control of spending, that's what it would mean. And that's just not on. Those few extra jobs would soon disappear, because what we've got to do is to make it possible for new, lasting jobs to be created. And that means a long, determined fight to win back the customers our industries have lost. The reason why we've lost them is shown here. The wages cost in what we produce almost doubled in the 5 years from 1975. In most other countries, it rose much less. In Japan, it didn't rise at all. That's how they kept their prices down, sold more and earned more, and have jobs for all their people. And that's why, in those same 5 years, our output went up only 8%, and theirs by 28%, nearly 4 times as much. That's true not just for the last few years, and not just compared with Japan. Look at the way in which we've been losing our share of world trade over the last 20 years. If we'd done as well as other major exporters, we'd be exporting nearly twice as much as we are today, with much higher living standards and much lower unemployment. In 1979, the country voted for a Conservative government because Margaret Thatcher promised we'd give people the chance to tackle those basic problems, because people were fed up with promises of instant solutions. We all knew it would be tough and would take time. We said that government couldn't create prosperity, and certainly not by itself, but that government could give the people of Britain a better chance to start creating prosperity for themselves. And that's just what is starting to happen. It doesn't mean our troubles are over, but it means that for the first time for many years, we've real hope for the future.
That was a party political broadcast by the Conservative Party. On BBC One shortly, Parkinson will be joined by Isaac Stern, Gerald Durrell and Peter Bull. Here on to Newsnight.
Good evening. Another victory for Mr. Michael Foot in his new campaign to take action against what he sees as Labour's unacceptable extremists. He's got Labour's organisation committee to order an inquiry into the so-called militant tendency. But it's a narrow victory of just one vote, and the prospect of a long and bitter battle between right and left now stretches forward dangerously close to the time when the party must expect to have to fight a general election. But Mr. James Callaghan, Labour's last leader and Britain's last Prime Minister, tells us he's for a fight to the death to stop the party being transformed. And Lord Underhill, who's already written a report on Labour's militant fringe, will be telling us what he thinks today's new inquiry will lead to. And we report from a Gloucestershire village where the divine light is casting a darkening shadow.
Anger is something that we're always expressing. And guess what? It destroys us. Absolutely fine, except that, hey, we begin to disintegrate under the strain of this.
Other stories in tonight's news. Lisa, the Sakharov's daughter-in-law, has now been told she can leave Russia, and the Sakharovs themselves have called off their hunger strike. At home, the super train breaks down on only its second day in service. British Rail blame the cold weather for today's trouble.
And I'll be looking at a new Australian film that deals with the fiasco of the Gallipoli campaign during the First World War. We hear from the man who helped land the Anzacs at Anzac Cove and from the historian who challenges the accuracy of the film's story.
Over there! Right, douse it! Douse it!
All that later.